Welcome to Buckets. I am your host, Brandon Anderson, coming to you live, as always, from our Tommy John home studios. I'm here with Jim Turvey for another episode of Friday Futures. Futures Friday. I never know which way it's going. We're doing both. We're only about a month out now from the playoffs, getting ready for one of my favorite times of the year, March Madness first. The bracket comes out Sunday. Be sure to be listening to the Big Bets on Campus podcast for all your college hoops needs. And then right about as that's ramping down, NBA playoffs will launch. So we are headed toward that direction. That's kind of the direction we're going with Futures Friday as well. Jim, back for another episode. You and I just recorded less than 12 hours ago over at Bet She Wins, a 2-hour Survivor extravaganza. And here we are back again to talk some NBA today. How you doing?
Yeah, I feel like it took a long time for us to actually get to pod together. We were texting friends much before podding friends, and now we're just leaning into the bit and doing multiple hours of podcasts a day, it feels like, which I'm totally here for. That one was fun. I'm really excited for this one. That was a draft. This is also a draft. Drafting an age-old podcast, a thing to do. So I'm very excited to see if we overlap on boards. And last night we definitely overlapped a lot. I'm guessing we might here as well.
Yeah, so today is a draft. Today's actually a two-parter, so we'll continue this one next Friday as well. So here's the goal. What we're doing is we are trying to figure out, as we look toward the playoffs, which players have the biggest delta in value from the regular season to the postseason. So I didn't really give any further instruction. We'll see as our boards play out in the draft exactly kind of how each of us chose to define value. Always a fun, conversation in the context of most valuable player and whatever else as we think of it. So we're just going to draft. We're going to go back and forth. No snake, just back and forth, one pick at a time, kind of talk through guys. Along the way, as usual, we'll talk some futures bets. We'll certainly talk some of the awards markets, some of the big games coming up this weekend. And then again, we're splitting this into two. So we decided the best way to do this is today we're going to draft guys who have positive value gains. So positive delta here. We decided to be optimistic first. And then come back next Friday, we'll do the pessimist one and talk about the guys that lose value in the postseason. And then a little more kind of takeaways from the exercise too, because I think that this was a fun exercise to reshape a little bit how I think about some of these teams. And some of them I changed my mind on a little bit. Some of them I was like, oh, that's why I'm down on this team. I never really quite thought of it framed this way, but this is maybe the thing here, or why I'm up on this team. But, I'm a pessimist by nature, so down more so. So, I think that's the exercise. Before we get started, Jim, any other comments? Are you ready to go?
No, honestly, I think I'm ready to go. I agree with your sentiment that it did help me reframe a few things. I had two teams in particular, and I think it's fitting. I think you and I, yin and yang. I have two teams in particular that I am now higher on, that I'm very intrigued by. And I found that the teams that I was like more skeptical of, I was already kind of skeptical of. So I actually like this as an opportunity to open up a few teams' possibilities at decent long odds. Again, we'll talk through that in the takeaways portion, but you probably will be able to figure it out by some of the names we talk through in this episode from me in terms of teams that I'm like, oh, okay, maybe a star player, maybe several role players. We'll go down the line with star players, role players, anyone who just has big gaps. They're going to be on our boards here. And how many did we decide an official number that we're going to do, or are we going to go vibes?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So definitely don't save for the end takeaways. Like mention those as we go, and then we'll kind of loop back at the end and refresh some of those. So if there's a team you're looking at or something, we're not saving draft strategy here. So just give the people some futures along the way. We officially do not know how many rounds we're doing. We officially are recording for an hour. So the faster we can get through picks, the more we'll get to. We both have like 25, 30 guys on our list up and 25 or 30 guys down. Probably won't talk at length about all those, but hopefully we'll have time for some honorable and or dishonorable mentions at the end to kind of just rifle off some other names here. So, and I don't know how much our lists will overlap also. It's possible quite a bit. That usually is the case with us. Maybe less. I'm going to say we maybe get to like 7 to 10 rounds. That's what the Google Doc is set up for us, but we'll see how we go. You got the first pick. Who is your biggest gainer from regular season to postseason for this year, Jim?
So this one kind of surprised me. This is one of the names that did pop up as, man, I knew this guy was good in the postseason. I didn't realize how good. And I'll kind of take behind the curtain as we start here to kind of talk about process a little bit. a lot of it for me was focusing on those advanced metrics. Basketball reference page, check out the effective field goal percentage, check out the 3-point shooting, check out the box plus minus. That's a really big one. They have the very clean ability to look at BPM in the regular season, BPM in the postseason. It's right there. It's very clean. So I'm really trying to look at impact here. And this is a player who at times I've had some questions about, but overall the numbers really do not lie in the postseason. And I love doing this because in part I'm always like, wait, so where was he on your board? So I'll say the name, and before I even dig in, I want to hear where he was on your board. I'm going with Anthony Edwards.
Anthony Edwards is my number one pick and why I'm rocking the Timberwolves shirt today. And I'm glad because we all know I don't exactly make homer picks. Like, if I was making homer picks, I would have Timberwolves atop the bad board. And spoiler alert, we're going to come back to that also on some of the other guys. But I do have Anthony Edwards number one. I'll add in some comments, but I want to hear your case for him.
Yeah, I mean, let me just go in total here what he averages in the regular season and the postseason. So with those surface stats, regular season career is averaging 24, 5, and 5. Very good numbers, but sometimes the impact stuff's a little bit lacking. He's got 53% effective field goal percentage and just a 1.8 career box plus minus. We go to the postseason, he jumps up 4 points a game, which is not nothing. Scoring gets a lot more difficult in the postseason. So he's now going for 28, 6, and 6 on 55% effective field goal percentage. He gets more effective in the postseason, but most notably 6.7 box plus minus in the postseason. That's about the tier of, like, it's not LeBron, but it's the tier right below LeBron. It's that tier of really, really, top 5 to 10 players in the postseason. And we have seen this in moments. In my mind, I kind of had, but then he also, does the Ant Edwards thing where sometimes he, presses it too much and isn't good. No, he's just been really good in the postseason. And in my mind, that opens up, like we said, with Minnesota, there's definitely some guys who are going to be on the negative side of this list, but there are definitely some players on the positive side of this right now. They're playing some of their best basketball right now. A few of those really bad players in the playoffs are actually playing really well right now. And I think there's like lineup flexibility. This team actually has a pretty good 1-8. If they have Ant as a top 5 player in the in the league, and then a decent depth, and Finch is able to make the right decisions. Again, this was a team in the Western Conference Finals last year. I think this team's being slept on a little bit. You can get some crazy numbers. You can get them 40-1 to win the Western Conference right now. To me, that is one of the ones. Spoiler alert on the giveaways and the bets. 40-1 for the Wolves to come out of the West. I have questions about every team in the league in general, but definitely in the West, even the Thunder right now, I do have some questions. I think this Minnesota team provides, some tough matchups for folks. And if Ant is this 6.7 BPM player, I think there's a lot to love about this Wolves team.
Yeah, so career 27.8 points a game in the playoffs in 27 games, all age 22 or younger, which is just an insane number. Last 2 playoffs alone, so get rid of the 20-year-old season, which I think is fair. Now you got 6 assists a game as well, so you're getting some playmaking in there. Now you go from 110 offensive rating with him on the court in the regular season to 120 in the postseason against the better defenses. Like, spoiler for the whole rest of how these 2 episodes go, everybody gets worse in the playoffs, or at best, just staying as good as you are is really good, and something that not many superstars do. There just aren't many guys where you're like, you go from like a solid all-star to a top 5 to 7 player. That's what's happening. Like, to me, to frame it differently, I guess in my pessimistic view, I think in the postseason, Anthony Edwards becomes the player everyone talks about him as the entire rest of the season. That's what I think is happening. Like, we watch it happen. We see like the next Michael Jordan conversation, all of that. In the playoffs, he is that thing so far, and it's incredible. In the regular season, it's not quite that thing yet. And I think over time, as he continues, he's still like a 23-year-old. So in time, he's going to, I think, catch up in the regular season. Maybe that's an effort or a night-to-night sort of thing. Maybe it's, a knack for him in his career has been saving it for the biggest games. Well, if you can do this in the biggest games, I guess you can do that thing. But yeah, to me, another thing too about his game that really changes is not only is the usage going up in the playoffs, so he's doing more in more minutes, more efficiently, he also turns into all defense in the playoffs, where like in the regular season is fine. Again, we use BPM a lot. It's very accessible and easy. Jim and I both like it. We know the flaws with the stat. Defensive BPM is especially flawed. I'm well aware. But in the postseason, these last 2 years, Ant goes to 2.4 defensive box plus minus, which is like an all elite top 5 defensive level. And he's playing 41 minutes a game because he's young and he's just like playing the whole thing. And he's probably still getting better. Like, we have every reason to believe this year, as he's continued to improve, that he'll be a better player now this year's playoffs than he has been previously. So yeah, I'm not there yet on the Minnesota playoff futures because that's just me. That's Minnesota Brandon not being able to quite get there with, quote, my team. And there are going to be multiple players when we get back to the negative list. This is the only one I have on a positive list for Minnesota. But yeah, I can't blame you for getting there because this dude turns into like what looks like genuinely a future Dwayne Wade or maybe future Michael Jordan type player in the playoffs, the way this career trajectory is going.
Yeah, 100%.
Any other thoughts before I go into my pick?
No, I think I'll let you run. I think I'm so glad that we once again aligned. I was like, I was like, I bet this is where Brandon has it, but I didn't see the shirt, so that was the dead giveaway there. I would have known if I could see that you had the Wolves shirt on. Yeah, well, I debated the blue shirt or the green shirt. This one's new for Christmas, but yeah, the mic is blocking the logo mostly. So yeah, all right, I'm gonna do my first pick here. I suspect my next couple of picks. My next 3 here, I'm not as convinced that we're going to align on, but we'll see. We thought about the first one. We really have not exchanged boards at all before this thing. So my next pick here is a guy that is already phenomenal in the regular season, but I think even better in the postseason. So I'm going to take Giannis Antetokounmpo as my top pick on the board here. And to me, this is about how I'm defining value. Giannis is playing, when healthy, 40-plus minutes in the playoffs. We are seeing now a ramped down version of Giannis Antetokounmpo in the regular season, and it still is third best in the league in MVP voting if he is healthy enough to get there. He still is scoring a ton of points, like possibly leading the league. I think a major difference for him is the guy that won Defensive Player of the Year. That's not happening ever again in the regular season. That is not Giannis anymore in the regular season, but it still is in the postseason. Like, there are some of these superstars see their minutes go up and their defense go up. That was a lot of the case with Ant. In the playoffs for his career on the court, 103 defensive rating. Like, insane numbers. The year that they won the title, that was defense. That was a defensive title. And not just him either. That's Drew Holiday, it's Brook Lopez. But, like, he's the dude. I mentioned defensive box plus minus Ant getting to 2.4. Giannis is routinely like 3.5 to 4, like breaking the number system basically. He's getting to over 10 box plus minus overall, and he's at 38% usage, which is an insane number of just doing everything. And on top of it, he's playing 7 extra minutes a game. So to me, as much as anything else, you're getting Giannis and a slightly better version of him. I think he's going to get a little less efficient in the playoffs. There's just not quite the same easy stuff there, but he's making up for that and more with the defense. But then you just get 7 more minutes of it. Like, that's just a lot more of what's already the best thing or almost the best thing in basketball. So to me, that's providing value if I just get 7 extra minutes of Giannis every night. Now, I know I'm not sure how much you factored injury into things here. We haven't really seen this from Giannis for a while because he hasn't been healthy for the most recent playoff runs, or he starts healthy and then can't quite get there to continue it. He gets hurt along the way. To me, I'm not quite ready yet to call that a Joel Embiid thing where it's like a pattern and the sort of injuries that are repeating, they look a little more flukish to me, but I could be wrong about that. That's the risk of this pick here. I believe right now the Milwaukee Bucks are 0-9 against the East top 3. So the Knicks and Celtics and Cavs. So not great. 0-9, historically not a great way to win a lot of playoff series. I don't have a lot of other Bucks high up in my list here. Damian Lillard, I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. The other guys, Portis, Kuzma, etc., not on a positive list for me. Yeah, we might be talking about them, but
yeah, we might be getting to them.
Not today.
So I'm curious what you think about Giannis and Giannis and the Bucks host on Sunday night the Oklahoma City Thunder as well. So any thoughts on Giannis or thoughts on that game coming up?
Yeah, it will be an interesting rematch of the game that doesn't count in the game logs, but
right.
that in-season tournament cup final that the Bucks were able to win and was kind of at the time their marquee win. And I think when we think about overall their ability to play against top teams, that doesn't pop up in the, when you do the query on Basketball Reference, but it is a game that counted, and I do think it was a notable one. I didn't have Giannis super high on my board only because I was weighing Delta so much, and he is so good in the regular season. But I will say, you framed it very well with the minutes, and I kind of
Yeah.
zoned on the fact of how much they are able to ramp him up in the postseason. I think if I had framed it that way, he would have been much higher. And like we keep saying, if you just maintain your stats, especially at the star level, that in and of itself is a delta because everyone else is losing 10% of their production, basically. Not everyone else, but a lot of people,
Yeah.
even a lot of, stars. If you go around and you look at like effective field goal percentage, 3-point shooting, box plus minus, they're all like about 10% lower. It's just harder to be good in the postseason. It's very challenging. The best of the best can do it. And so I think Giannis is a really good pick. The Bucks as a whole, I agree. I have more names on next week's episode than this week's episode. And I think that's, to spoil something I'm going to say in next week's episode, I am frustrated with how they handled the the trade deadline this season. I think that has kind of cut into their ability to hang with a Cleveland. We saw them get boat run by Cleveland again. I think if I'm the Bucks, I do not want to play the Cavs. I don't know if they can get out of that 4-5 in any way, but I think right now I'm still on the Cleveland side. I know that's one of the rare spots where I think you and I have a little bit of disagreement. I think you're still pretty high on the Bucks in terms of being able to give the Cleveland a series. I think it's just going to be really difficult for them to slow down Cleveland and then also keep up with it. Like it almost seems like on both ends it's going to be a struggle for Milwaukee. But Giannis as a player, you never get me to disagree with Giannis as an outstanding postseason player, top 2-3 player in the league overall. And I'm with you on the injuries. I think that those were both pretty fluky. I think it's fair to downgrade him a tiny bit, but I wouldn't downgrade him more than, a 2-3% off of, a couple fluky injuries. And he seems like, knock on all the wood around, he seems like he's pretty healthy right now. And they are, keeping his minutes relatively low. So hopefully that maintains towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and really on the Cleveland matchup, it's just that I'm just this high on Giannis. Like he's my number 2 player and closer to 1 than the rest of the field in the postseason. And it's just terrified of, we've watched a lot of basketball. You want the best player in the series. And I think Giannis as the best player is still markedly higher than any other Cleveland guys, even if they have, their 4 guys in the mix after that. So I think it comes down to that. On Oklahoma City, Milwaukee, you don't have to give names here. I'm just curious, will you on today's episode be drafting someone on the other team there? Do you think you're going to have a Thunder mention today?
Let me scroll through my little list here. It's certainly not for a long time.
I don't either. And I thought that was really interesting on this exercise. We'll get back to the Thunders. We'll talk about that when we get there.
There's one name, and it's like number 23 on my list or something. It is.
Yeah, I have number 28 and 29. So we'll probably get to some Thunder honorable mentions. But yeah, that's about it. All right, let's keep moving. We can't do like 7 minutes on every pick. You're up with your second pick. Who you got?
Well, let me do a little bit of podcasting magic here. Let me go. We just talked Bucks and Cavs. I'm going to pick a Cav, and I'm sure I could have gotten him a few rounds later. I think this is a player, again, there's a little bit of delta between you and I and how we see this player. I'm going with Donovan Mitchell. This is another player. He's not quite at the level of an Anthony Edwards in the postseason, but he kind of splits the difference between regular season Anthony Edwards and playoff Anthony Edwards. He's one of those players who's in that kind of, 4-win box plus minus win tier. That's like a very solid player. And I really do think that he has the ceiling to kind of pop up into that 6 BPM tier this postseason. We've seen it at times. The bubble is what everyone thinks of, but even beyond the bubble, I mean, his first series as a 21-year-old, he put up 29 and 7. That was not in the bubble. That was in the regular postseason. And this season, what really jumps out to me, that in my mind, the swing series for Cleveland, I mean, obviously they have to get there, but they should be thinking about Boston first and foremost. And Donovan Mitchell has been amazing against Boston this season. He's put up 40 in one game. He's cleared 30 every game. These big matchups, he's been outstanding. And he has a little bit of the Giannis thing here where his minutes are going to go up. They're keeping his minutes very low this season. Kenny Atkinson's done a great job with that. They haven't needed him. They've been running teams off the court within, he's kind of got the shade disease of like, if you look at his numbers through 3 quarters, it's almost the same as his numbers through 4 because so often they have such big leads. If he's up at that like 40 minutes a game mark, which I think he's able to do, he's a very durable player that's kind of lost in the conversation about him at times. The impact you're going to be getting from in 38 to 40 minutes of Donovan Mitchell. It's part of why I'm so high on this Cleveland team. I really do think he can jump into that tier of the 6 box plus minus type guys. We've seen it at times. We've seen it against Boston particularly. He really loves that matchup. So I skipped ahead of, a name or two here just to do the good podcasting thing, but I don't want that to undersell how high I am on Donovan Mitchell. And I think that he is the type of guy who steps up in those bigger games, bigger moments. And that's part of why I'm so high on this Cleveland team.
Yeah, I had Mitchell 7th on my list, so I think probably relatively similar to you, just slightly lower probably. Career 28.1 points a game in the playoffs. So I do think looking at the numbers, a lot of that is just the minute spike, which a lot of these stars are going to get. He does have a pretty consistent free throw spike in the playoffs, which I think is pretty valuable, just kind of saving the physicality for there. The only thing that made him slightly lower for me, looking back over like 4 real playoff runs, he has had one elite playoff run and one great one, but he had 2 like not so good either. He's been relatively streaky. And I wonder, I picture Donovan Mitchell playoffs as the bubble Mitchell that you mentioned, just nailing threes after threes. Like, what was it him and was it Damian Lillard that were just like, or no, Jamal Murray that were like exchanging 50-point games, I think.
Yep.
And like when Mitchell gets going, when that 3 is falling, especially, like, man, he belongs here for sure. But, part of being a superstar is not necessarily reaching that height, but reaching it consistently. And can you do it over 7 games? Can you do it over 4 series? And that's the question we're going to find out, in this playoffs with him. So, yeah, I think, too, with Mitchell, again, I considered kind of availability and health. He only really plays like 55, 60 games in the regular season. He misses the 65 mark in a lot of the seasons. So just having him out there, and I think, he's kind of never been a major injuries guy, but just always seems to have like, a nick of some sort or another. So just saving him, I think, for in the playoffs when it matters, I think is just smart load management in this case. Sunday, Cavs play the Magic. We probably don't need to talk too much about that one. It's not on national TV, but that is a possible first round series and is a rematch of last year's series that I loved so dearly. Couldn't get enough of that one. So yeah, I like Donovan Mitchell a lot. I hope that we get the high highs. Yeah, I'm going to go into my next pick here. I'm going to keep this one relatively easy because I think it's kind of actually like a boring pick. It's similar to my Giannis pick. I said he was my number 2 player in the playoffs. The one guy I'd have number 1 is Nikola Jokic, and that's my pick here because Nikola Jokic just gets to play more minutes. And I get more Nikola Jokic, and that's the case. Like, he doesn't really get any worse. He gets slightly less efficient because, my God, how could you not when you're breaking every efficiency metric otherwise? But, what that means for him is on-court rating, 133 offensive rating down to a measly 128 in the postseason. Like, come on, what are we doing here? You get 6 extra minutes a game. Here's the math. That's 18% more Nikola Jokic. That's it. You're on the list because of that. If I get 18% more Nikola Jokic at still like a 13 BPM, breaking every metric, that's it. That's the case. So rather than talk Jokic, we've done a lot of that. We'll do a lot of that. Here's my question from an award standpoint. We know how the Jokic-Shea conversation for MVP, we know. You've talked about it, I'm sure, like over and over, future Jays on Mondays. Here's my specific question for you. It's clearly those two. As the market stands today with a month to go, do you think the market moves more towards Jokic or more towards Shea? If you are someone like me, I've got a Shea position, and do I want to hedge Jokic? Do I want to do it now or later or vice versa? I'm just curious, which direction do you think the market price moves? Not like a little bit, but like significantly before we close out the season.
Yeah, well, I'll say that my preseason was Shea, and I did choose to hedge with Jokic because I do think it's a conversation, and I think that it is, these awards are all narrative, right? That's what we always talk about, and it really is a road diverge, and you can take two paths here, where it's like the coalescing, the mind meld type of stuff very much does happen at times, and I think we've kind of seen that behind Shea. So there's a very reasonable case for saying, you know what, they don't have another head-to-head. Those head-to-heads, people weighed the Sunday more than the Monday, and all the eyeballs were on that, and that was the game that Shea won, and he kind of wrapped it up. But people love, again, we're all in the content business. People love to say, well, you know what, people are sleeping on, and then that becomes the story, and that's the content for, the final week of the season, or maybe the week before the final week, when, the final week we have all the fun, seeding stuff. But hey, we got to talk about something here the week before the penultimate week of the season here. if I had to pick one side or the other, I think it gets longer. I think it goes more towards Shea. I think that it is locked and loaded. However, I will say if you have a Shea ticket and you have not hedged at any point with Jokic, I don't mind making sure you make a little money on this, because I do think there is a chance, even if the market moves a little bit, I do think there is a chance that Jokic could win this thing. The numbers, if people step back, he is having the best season. Now, you and I have debated in the past about if someone's having the best season, they should win MVP. I'm not as much on that side. I think it is a narrative award, and that voter fatigue, I understand it. And I think that, you tell the story of the season via the MVP. I'm okay with that. And I think there are a lot of people that, even if they don't admit that, that's how they vote at the end of the day. So, but I think, I do think Jokic is the best player. And if people just zoom out, we've seen it happen in baseball where it kind of just has become control sort war leaderboard. And I think that across sports, we're moving more and more that direction.
Yeah.
Voter fatigue is less and less of a thing in the modern era. I still think Shea has been good enough this season to get it done. I think the Thunder don't really look like they're slowing down. It looks like Jalen Williams won't be missing a crazy amount of time. He'll be back. I think they'll get to a really nice high win total and get the award. But all that being said, I don't mind a tiny little hedge on Jokic just to make sure you profit on this. If you only bet Shea at the beginning of the season and you're just sitting on that one ticket, it's going to play out great. But just make sure you come out a winner here. So I don't mind that either.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. The J-Dub injury, even if it's not too long-term, kind of means Shea has to actually earn MVP. For the guys that are saying well, but he has so much help and it's all defense there. Okay, we've given other MVPs out. And let's be fair too. This is not Derrick Rose. Shea's numbers, do the comparison from Shea to Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose was great, and I thought a clear deserving top 3 MVP candidate at worst in that season. Shea's numbers blow Derrick Rose's numbers out of the water, and he's a way better defender than Derrick Rose was as well on a better defense. So I think that is a fair comparison narrative-wise, but that Shea is a much better player. But yeah, I think with J-Dub out, do the Thunder crumble a little bit? Do they lose a few games? And then maybe Shea loses the MVP because the wins certainly are the biggest argument in his favor. Or do they keep winning? They just beat the Celtics in a big marquee game. And is that kind of close the award out for him? I lean toward the latter because there's still such a good team around him. But I think that is going to sort of make the case itself. So yeah, let's keep going. Pick number 5, your third pick on the board for best positive delta in the playoffs.
So it's funny. I have a couple of names here. They're all kind of in the same tier, and I have them ordered, but I'm actually going to not go with the name at the top because I want to make sure we talk about this guy and this team because it's a name that I found, Ant was a little bit surprising. I was like, I thought he had dropped a little bit. This was the most surprising name to me. I'm going to go with Ja Morant. I don't know if he made your list. Wow. I know. Yeah, I thought maybe that would be a little bit surprising. I was surprised when I looked at his number. His BPM has been better in the playoffs than in the regular season. Every single season he's made it, which kind of breaks a narrative in my mind that Memphis gets to the postseason and is unclutch, and presumably that's because their fast-paced transition offense kind of dries up. If that's the case, it's certainly not because of Ja. So his efficiency is about the same, if not a little bit higher. His assists go up, his steals go up, his turnovers go down. He just is a better player in the postseason. And I feel like this is our theme of the pod here. Another guy whose minutes have been kept low all season in preparation for a potential run. Memphis is another team that I don't know how far down the list we'll get, but there's a couple of guys on Memphis who intrigue me here. And there really aren't that many guys who we'll talk about next week for Memphis. Memphis is a team that I have been skeptical of at times this season. Doing this exercise, they were the second team that popped to me as I'm actually a little bit intrigued. They have a lot of seeding room to work around. They could be as high as the 2 seed. They could be as low as the 6-7 seed. This is going to be a team that I don't want to bet today because of that. And because I'm a little bit more skeptical of them than the Minnesota ticket that is A, longer, and B, maybe even a little bit more trustworthy. But if the bracket cuts Memphis's way and they get Houston the first round and then the 3-6 shakes up where somehow they avoid Denver and something weird happens to Clippers or whatever it may be, that somehow the bracket breaks their way, I think I'm going to be looking at Memphis to make a run, if not to the finals, then at least to the conference finals, because I had a narrative in my head and looking through and doing this exercise kind of flipped that narrative around a little bit and made me higher on the Grizzlies than I had been coming into this.
Yeah, I think Ja is interesting to me. So I had him, I ranked my top 15 here, and then I have about 15 more kind of honorable mention names vaguely in order. Ja is my top honorable mention. So I guess I have him 16th on my list. To me, my main concern is that all the playoff value we've seen from Ja has come before the major injury, where he has been a markedly worse player in the regular season, and we have not seen him now in the playoffs since then. So I just worry that the whole thing is a projection. And we can certainly project that maybe he's sort of saving it back for the playoffs with his minutes, with his effort level. That all makes sense, particularly the style of player that he is. But I just think we don't know yet. So it's a risk factor. I have Grizzlies, a handful of them, in my honorable mentions on both of these things. So they're just a team that I'm not quite sure where I'm at on with them. And a lot of it is still projection, too. We just haven't seen a lot from some of their guys. Speaking of projection and speaking of taking a risk, I'm going to take my biggest risk on the board here. And this is a guy that, quite frankly, if I didn't really think the risk was there, would be a slam dunk far and away number one pick for me on my board. It's Kawhi Leonard. I can't quit Kawhi Leonard. He sucks right now. It is so bad. I didn't realize how bad it was in the regular season. Under 30 minutes a game, 18-5-3, which is like Tobias Harris levels of production. Maybe not anymore, but in my head, that's what that stat line reads. 104 offensive rating, negative BPM, 54% true shooting. Like, we might just be done here. We might just be cooked, and that's it. In the last 3 years, he's played 4 playoff games. So I don't even know if he has it in there anymore. But if we get Kawhi in the playoffs, every time we've gotten Kawhi in the playoffs, except the last time, he played 2 games. He was already hurt coming in. He clearly wasn't right. I'm throwing those 2 games out. Every other time for his career since like 2015, basically, he has turned into, and I do not say this lightly, Michael Jordan in the playoffs. Like, the numbers are out of control. There's no bigger swing. It's offense. It's defense. Everything is still there. You and I were texting about EFG just before we came on here today. I'm not sure who you're looking for this one, so we'll come back to it. But, like, if you look just this century, I mentioned to you Nikola Jokic is just outside the top 10 in EFG for playoff guys this century that have played at least 60 games. Kawhi Leonard is right there with Nikola Jokic. Like, the top of the list is, like, DeAndre Jordan and Rudy Gobert. Like, guys that are just dunking, and that's the only thing that they do. Kawhi is not even a big man. Kawhi is shooting jumpers and is that positive in the playoffs. He's actually higher than Jokic in true shooting. He's top 10 for the century in true shooting, 62%. In the playoffs. To be that elite offensively, to be that stone cold, and he still is a 3+ defensive box plus minus in the playoffs. He is, to me, if I somehow believed in my heart of hearts that Kawhi could give me a healthy playoff run, not 2 games, but 2 months, he, to me, goes into the Jokic Giannis tier, and that's it. There are no other people in that group, and I don't even know that Kawhi is third in that group. I just also don't know if that version is still there, but just the possibility that it is, because we've seen it so far, is so much value to me from a title equity standpoint that I can't ignore it. So I'm curious if you had Kawhi even on your board at all. I don't blame you if you didn't, but I'm taking him with my 3rd pick here, and I could have taken him first.
I had a whole section called Keep an Eye On, and he was in the Keep an Eye On tier, and my notes for him just literally said, let Brandon take him. I knew you would take him. I know you too well. I know your love for Kawhi goes so deep. Listen, if we're going delta off of regular season and postseason, you're at a perfect point to buy in on Kawhi, because it can't get a whole lot worse. Yeah, it's a great buy low, and he has shown the ability time and time again to flip the switch. I don't think that ceiling is there anymore, but I do think that a ceiling of, a 2 to 3 BPM type player is there, and that's a huge delta, to be honest. Now, we probably don't draft that type of player, at the 3rd pick in a draft like this, but I do, that capability is there. The Clippers as a whole, I didn't come out of this draft loving them. Harden's a guy who I think a lot of people think, he should be the first pick in the terrible in the playoffs. It's not that bad, but it's also not amazing either. He's like kind of just a little bit worse. He's one of the most average type of players in the postseason. Zubac, again, spoiler for tomorrow, he is for next week. He might be on the bad side of things. So they don't have a whole lot there going on. So I think that also matters too. Where, like, if we're getting a 2 to 3 BPM Kawhi, 3 to 4 James Harden, and then a bunch of wings that I don't know if I trust them at all. I just don't know if that's going to matter all that much. So I was fine leaving him off of my board and knowing that you would do the talking about Kawhi for the 2 of us.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right. So just to reset the board here, top 6 picks in our positive delta: Anthony Edwards, number 1; Giannis, number 2; Donovan Mitchell, Nikola Jokic, John Morant, Kawhi Leonard. Jim, you got pick number 7. Who you got?
There's 3 guys I'm debating between. I think all 3 should be taken by one of us in this draft. And I would imagine that I think your next pick will be one of these guys. I'm going to go with old Anthony Edwards, Jimmy Butler. He's a guy who's been doing this his whole career: 18-5-4 in his career, 21-6-5 in the postseason, 4.9 BPM regular season, 5.7 in the postseason. His 21-22 alone kind of proved his bona fides for this. And he is a little bit of the Donovan Mitchell disease, where he does have sometimes where he goes missing a little bit, in part because of injury sometimes, or playing through injury, or he goes insane in one series and kind of burns himself out for later series. But I think on this Warriors team with Steph, with Draymond, certainly Draymond's a guy who, I don't know if we'll get to him today, maybe just in passing, but is a guy who is, his game translates very well to the postseason, and it translates in a way that runs a lot of guys off the court. That's an inherent value that you probably don't even get to in the stats, but he's able to make teams adjust to him. Jimmy Butler and these Warriors are really intriguing. They had another monster win last night against the Kings. They're just a very strong team right now, with a couple of guys who do very well in the postseason. I know we keep talking about Western Conference teams I'm interested in. The West is just pretty good. And I think it all comes around to, and this is under Jimmy Butler, and now I'm talking about the Thunder, but it all comes back to that I do have some skepticism. Like we said, you and I don't have a Thunder player in our top 20 on these lists. I have a lot of Thunder stock. I'm looking to diversify here a little bit. I got my Thunder stock preseason. It has paid off very well. This is the time I'm looking to leverage it a little bit. Maybe it's Minnesota to win the West. Maybe it's just the Warriors, first round series. Maybe it's if we get a Warriors Thunder matchup in the second round. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in on the Warriors. Even you can see a game because I'm going to start in OKC, see how it goes and all that. But there's a lot of really good teams in the West. There's a lot of really good players that step up their games in the West. I think the Thunder, before the season, I was like, lock it in. I think I'm not scared of them come postseason. I'm a little bit more scared of them come postseason now. I've seen some things in the regular season, even though they've been outstanding, that have given me slight hesitation. So Jimmy Butler, I mean, getting a guy like that for the postseason, when he arrived in Golden State, it was kind of like, is this going to matter? The Warriors are on the fringe of the play-in. They have been outstanding with him, and now they've thrown themselves right into the conversation. And I think that's a fair reaction to what we have seen in Golden State. Was he among your next to be picked, I assume?
Slightly lower. I have him 12th on my board, but only because I'm so high on Jimmy Butler and on all the Warriors. Like that's just been, I know the way I talk runs hot and cold on Butler because of the personality parts of him. But like as a player, he's so good and consistently a top 10 player to me in the regular season already that it's like, the only reason it's not a bigger positive delta is because I'm so high on him already as it is, that he actually, like, he was that good, everyone. You should be paying attention is the reason. But yeah, certainly I asked Raheem Palmer, old Buckets colleague, this question, and Butler was his first pick that he said, or the first name that he mentioned as well. Pretty obvious candidate here. So, not obvious and like, oh, that was a boring pick, but like definitely has to be on the list here for sure. Has to be mentioned in a podcast like this. I'm going to go next with the guy that I think actually from this exercise, for me as a takeaway, I think this is the most important player on this list to me, the most important takeaway. And it's, I think, the first time that either one of us is taking a second player from the same team. So I think you probably know where I'm going with that. I'm going to go with Jamal Murray. And I think Jamal Murray, positive playoff delta, if I'm right, is one of the biggest swing factors in postseason odds and futures odds. I have to say if I'm right, because last year I do like my MVP, I do a playoff MVP. I don't know why we don't have a playoff MVP. Get out of here with conference finals MVP. Get out of here with finals MVP. I don't need a 4-game sample prize. Give me MVP from the whole playoffs. And yeah, I know you got to weigh in who played longer and who didn't. Like that's all part of the value. That's what I'm weighing here. Jamal Murray went from second in MVP value in the playoffs, or third, I think. I must have Jimmy Butler ahead of him, I'm sure. But he was incredible on the playoff run. He was not as good as Jokic because nobody is, but he was hugely a part of why the Nuggets made the run that they did. They would not have done it, Jokic or not, without Jamal Murray, to last year, where Jamal Murray was my LVP of the playoffs. I think Jamal Murray is the reason the Nuggets got knocked out in the playoffs. He was awful. He was so bad. but he was also hurt. So you said Jimmy Butler, old Anthony Edwards. I wonder if Jamal Murray is Anthony Edwards, but on a team that matters a little bit more, in that Ant seems to sort of hold back the effort for when it matters most. Everything we have about Jamal Murray now, we hear plenty about the Nuggets from Matt Moore, obviously Denver Nuggets insider. There's always lots to say about Jamal Murray. And then the numbers too. I don't know if it was you or Joe sharing the group chat. Jamal Murray consistently, season after season, if you look at like the metrics, the percentages, the advanced metrics, it's a line up from the start of the season to the middle of the year to the end of the year is just slowly going high. I'm motioning with my hand if you're not watching the video, it's just like linear going up and to the right. It's the thing you'd want, except, be great if you'd show up and try in October ever sometime as well. Maybe his body just can't handle it. But in 2020 and 2023, his two long playoff runs, that's 39 games. That's half of an NBA season because they had a lot of games in there. He's a 5.3 BPM player, out from 2 in the regular season. He's never been a great regular season player. Last year was his best, but then he was hurt in the playoffs. And so don't do that again, I guess, apparently. But he's up to 40 minutes a game. He goes from 20 to about 26 points a game. Not a small increase there. The splits constantly go up. The offensive rating goes up with him on the court. And of course, that all helps because you're playing a lot more and you're playing a lot more with Jokic. But to me, Jamal Murray, you don't win a title. Very rarely in NBA history do you win a title with one star, no matter how super duper elite that they are. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, any of the above. Nikola Jokic, I think, is that good in that list of people. You still don't win a title or make the finals usually without having that second actual star. Jamal Murray, can he be an actual second star still? If he can be, to me, the Nuggets, the way we talk about them from a title standpoint, from a future standpoint, never quite have looked that way with anything we see in the regular season. I think the reason is because we know how good Jokic is, but we know what Murray can be in the playoffs if it's still in there. Can he do it night to night? Can he do it for 2 months? Is he healthy enough? I think that still is, and I think that's why maybe my gut still always sort of thinks as Denver, not OKC, as the real king of the West that has to get knocked down because of the thing we've said about the Thunder. And here we are in my rankings. That's two Nuggets in my top 5 in my rankings. So I'm curious what you think about Jamal Murray.
I had him on this list for sure, but much lower for me, in part because the injury stuff to me it is injury stuff, but it's more conditioning. And like you said, the conditioning is so much. I think he works himself into condition, but if you're always teetering on the edge and you have to be in conditioning, then sometimes it's like, oh wait, I ramped up, but now I'm worn down because actually the baseline here, the foundation of this house is actually rotten, and come the important time, it's collapsing in on itself. So he is incredibly high variant. He does have the capability, and I agree. I think one of the fun things we can do at the end of this is the biggest pivot pieces in the postseason. Who could, if their deltas and could go either direction. Was the highest ceiling to floor delta is kind of a way to think about this as well. He is right at the top of that list, and I agree. Denver is a team that, if Jamal Murray is at the playoff Jamal Murray, I think we would both agree they're the best. They are the best team, because if you put one of the 5 to 10 best players of all time with that type of a 5 BPM player with a decent rest of the starting lineup, Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon fit their roles decently enough, is not complete scrubs. That's probably the best team in this current modern iteration of the NBA, where you can't stack Bosh, Wade, and James. That is the best team you're going to be able to get. I just have a little bit more doubt of if that's going to happen. I would love to see it. I really genuinely would. I want every player to be at their best so that we truly get the best team. I just have, I think, a little bit higher level of skepticism on Jamal and his ability to condition himself, but also not be worn down. It's a very thin line he provides himself by not being in great condition and having to work himself into it.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. All right, I want to get to more names here. We've got maybe 8 to 10 more minutes of draft. You had 3 people in a group with Jimmy Butler, so give me another one of them here.
Yeah, Jamal was not one of them. I'm going to go with a guy who right now is sidelined, but should be back by the by the postseason, Jalen Brunson. I have to Yeah, we have to shout out Joe here. I think Joe probably would have had him maybe first or second on his big board if you were joining us
First
today.
and second on his big board.
Yeah, exactly. With Josh Hart third. He's the epitome of a guy whose efficiency does drop a little bit in the postseason, but you're aptly going to take it because he's taking really hard shots. Now, what I'm really curious to see is during this stretch where he's out, if the Knicks can unlock a few guys who can make it so his efficiency doesn't have to drop, because I don't think Brunson is the type of guy to force it unless he has to, but he will force it if he has to. And Mikal Bridges has been a huge disappointment for most of this season for the Knicks. He has played some of his basketball since Brunson went down, and it makes sense to a degree. He's a guy who weirdly for like he should be a perfect role player, but the times we've seen him really thrive after Phoenix were kind of as the lead guy in Brooklyn when he got that chance to kind of be a front guy. And we got this mirage of, oh my God, he's a front man suddenly, but he has struggled to transition back out of that. I'm hoping that this will allow the Knicks to kind of figure out, okay, Bridges can kind of maybe lead things when Brunson's on the bench instead of McBride or something. Like, figure out a way to use this Brunson injury to kind of raise the ceiling of the team, because this is a team that theoretically should actually match up pretty decently with Boston. They have OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges on the wings to throw at Boston. They have Towns, who can be the stretch center that can go against Porzingis. They have Brunson, who I would take from an offensive perspective in the postseason over any of the Celtic guys, which maybe I'm a hater, but the Brunson ceiling is really high on the offensive side in particular. The worry is, he's out right now with an injury. He looked really worn down by the end of last year's run. He is a small guard. Small guards struggle in the postseason often to, either stay healthy the whole time or just maintain that level of success beyond Steph. And Steph is bigger than most of the guys people call small guards. That's like the dirty little secret, is he looks tiny and frail and he's just shooting from his hip, but he's actually bigger than Brunson. And, Brunson's a little stockier, but the wear and tear on these small guards does add up. So I want to see, if the Knicks are able to unlock some guys, if Brunson comes back and isn't like, please don't rush him back. Let him be fully healthy, and let this be the advantage you have of getting a fully healthy Brunson coming in the postseason, fully rested. I would be suddenly, I wouldn't be slamming the Knicks. They have shown that they have struggled to beat Boston this year, but if they can unlock a few guys, if Brunson is back healthy and rested, and that series starts and I'm able to see, okay, wait, this is the Knicks team that I envisioned being a decent matchup against Boston. Before the season, I was pretty intrigued by the theory of this Knicks team against Boston. That could come back. It's not fully gone, but I'm going to need to see something to get there. And Brunson is kind of, he needs to be the best offensive player in that series if the Knicks have a chance.
Yeah, my only knock on Brunson is that the defense becomes pretty damaging in the playoffs. Like, he certainly gets targeted that way. And, if we're going to hype the guys, that defense goes up in their value. I think that is fair to point out with Brunson, but certainly all the other positive things there. He was 8th on my list. I need 1 minute from you on an award that I have never cared for 1 second about in my life. How is Jalen Brunson a heavy minus 300 favorite for clutch player when clutch is about at the end of things coming through when it matters, and he's not here at the end of the season when it matters? Is it really just over? Is it just Brunson? Is there any other name you can give me that I should be betting here?
I'm convinced that Delara just took all of his law money, put it all on Brunson clutch player of the year, and moved the market, because it doesn't make any sense to me either. I am curious to see if this slowly adjusts as he's out. I really do think, all joking aside, because he's the one player, if listeners are not aware, I have Trae Young, I have Jokic from preseason, and they're the other two guys in the race for this. And of course, Brunson's going to win it, and I missed out entirely on the Brunson thing. But I do think, if they can give him some time and make sure he's fully rested, I think that is of the utmost importance. I think that all that time out is only going to give people, this award has basically been control sort clutch points, and he isn't even at the lead right now. He did have a stretch where it was outstanding. There was like a 2-week stretch that was like comical. He scored like 70 clutch points and flew up the leaderboard, and it kind of solidified him. I kind of think it was a little bit of a mirage. I think if he had stayed healthy, it would have been enough to stay on there. But I think Trae in particular is interesting, because I think he's the one who's going to end up at the top of the leaderboard. Jokic is the one who, like, by plus minus and like by the impact stats, probably should win it. He was a beautiful first half favorite. It was a great CLV
Yeah.
sandwich. I don't think it's probably going to get home. It is a goofy award, and if it does end up being Brunson, you just tip your cap and you say, what can you do? But it does seem a little strange that it was basically this one big blast of just crazy close Knicks games where he was doing insane work. But outside of that, I mean, he's hurt now, and at the beginning of the season, he wasn't really even in the conversation. So a very strange award for sure.
I have no numbers on this. The football better in me has one eye on Nikola Jokic on this award, under the premise of we give MVP out in football, but then we have an Offensive Player of the Year award. What if we just give that to we can't really give a running back MVP. Don't be ridiculous. But Offensive Player of the Year, that's a running back now. Maybe could that be just if Shea starts to pull away for MVP, could it be Jokic? So I'm kind of hoping maybe Brunson gets a little longer or shorter even on the number. If I could see a Jokic 10-1 odds, this market has never interested me at all. I don't care. It's a ridiculous award. But I might sprinkle a 10-1 for a half unit or something to see if I can kind of pull a narrative let's give him a consolation award, which would infuriate me, to be clear. But, seems like a thing that would happen. I'm going to just go easy on my next pick here. Maybe you've heard of LeBron James. I'm just going to take LeBron James. He's going to play harder. He's going to play more. We're going to get more LeBron James. His free throws go up. His rebounds go up. His defense is better. End of case. We get this weekend Lakers Nuggets on Friday. We get Lakers Suns on Sunday. Two big marquee Lakers games that LeBron won't be featured in. So That's it. Nothing to say about those games. Enjoy your television. I don't know if we need to watch those ones. LeBron next. You've got one more, I think, guy in your tier. So I'm going to do one more round, and then we'll rapid fire through some honorable mentions.
I'll say this. I think we can move us to – so LeBron was the final guy in that tier. So we cleared my top six. It was a full tier by itself. And I'll say this about LeBron. He actually was second on my rankings. I just kept not picking him when we did this actual draft. I think it's in part because I want to see the Luka and LeBron thing. And I was hoping at this point we would have seen – I prepped for this, a little while back. I was hoping we would have seen more of it. There are some weird things with Luka and LeBron on the court at the same time, net rating versus, Luka by himself was amazing, but then they also got kind of wrecked by Milwaukee last night without LeBron, which kind of makes sense against a good team. You want both of your really good players out there. So It's in part that I just want to see more of this, but last season he posted, it was a 5-game series, but he had a 10.6 BPM. LeBron James is still LeBron James. I'm glad that we got him as the final pick, but I'm definitely down. I have a lot of names in this kind of middle player tier that I think we can just rattle off if you've got a bunch as well.
So let me just remind listeners here of our top 10. So number 1, Anthony Edwards, Giannis, Donovan Mitchell, Nikola Jokic, John Morant rounded out our top 5. Then Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, Jamal Murray, Jalen Brunson, and LeBron James. That's our top 10, true to form. We went through 5 rounds like you thought we would all along ago because we had a lot to say. So let me give you 90 seconds on the clock to rattle names. You got one sentence at most about guys. So give me some guys you need to mention here.
All right, I'm gonna do them in order. So, and this I semi-ordered them. So start this. This is ordered to a degree. Jaden McDaniels. It's just one postseason, and it's easy to kind of write off. But he's having a mini breakout right now without Randall. That's a guy, again, another Minnesota player. I'm intrigued by him. Andrew Nemhard, another guy, one postseason, but it was really excellent. The advanced stats went crazy. Now, was it just that he had a really hot shooting from 3? Totally could be, but I want to keep an eye on him. Al Horford, he's the one Celtic, the highest Celtic I have on here.
He was next on my list.
He still translates beautifully to the postseason. He's one of the guys where the experience thing is real. He's top 10 by win shares all time in the postseason. Josh Hart, his shooting gets better in the postseason, even though he has a bigger offensive load. He's just kind of that dude that kind of is it makes sense that he would still be good in the postseason. Draymond, we touched on Draymond briefly. He makes people adjust to him. He is the guy who saves, some of it for the postseason. Dame Lillard, I had on here. I think people might be surprised that we don't have him higher. I think maybe you had some notes on him, maybe even being lower for you. But just last season, he put up an efficient 31 a game and was 8th in BPM for the postseason. So I think he still does have that ceiling. And if you're talking yourself into Bucks, it has to be around Dame. Devin Booker, I'll always love that 22-23 season. Maybe he can lead the Suns up to the 8 seed somehow just to get swept by the Thunder. That would be very fun. I do have one other Celtic. I've got Derek White. He's one of those he's a role player who gets a little bit better, which it sounds like a small bar, but he's not even really, he's like a super role player. He's
star role player.
And he even gets a little better. Gary Payton has been weirdly great in his 2 postseasons. 72.4% effective field goal percentage and 5.2 BPM. I literally did a double take when I saw those numbers. Again, we're talking small sample size. We're talking role players, but that was a guy who popped out to me. Obi Toppin, weirdly good in the playoffs. Again, we could be small sample here, small sample for a bench guy, but just a name that popped. De'Aaron Fox, he's now hurt. The Spurs aren't going to make the playoffs, but he's a guy in the grand scheme of things. If we're thinking about Wemby and we're just moved on to the next season, he's a guy who his numbers have translated really well to the postseason. So there's my 90 seconds of dudes. I wonder if you had any of them, and then I want to hear yours as well.
Yeah, pretty good on the 90 seconds. So kudos on there. Al Horford was going to be my last draft pick if we did another round, in part because Al Horford has quietly been not that great this season, actually. Like, there's more room for Delta on him. Just a guy that you love in the playoffs. He was phenomenal in their playoff run last year. He was so good and really, really important for them. We need to be right about Al Horford, because my one concern with Boston is the big men and the big men rotation. And Porzingis is at the very least on my question marks on this list. So we haven't really seen it yet. We didn't see it last year, really, and we haven't seen him have a playoff run really in his career. I'm skeptical about some of the names you mentioned, just because I'm not willing to commit to the small sample on guys like Jaden McDaniels, who I think player type I'd be skeptical on normally. Andrew Nembhard was phenomenal, but one run reminded me of, I'm blanking now, guy from the Miami Heat that like shot 80 billion% against the Celtics on threes.
Caleb Martin.
Yeah, that's the guy. So that's Andrew. I'm a little worried Andrew Nembhard could be that. I had Horford top 10 on my list. I had Derek White just outside. Other guy that we haven't mentioned in my top 10 is Franz Wagner. Did not expect that to show up on my list. I'm not sure if that really counts, because I think basically what maybe happened last year, and it is a small sample, but maybe just turned into what he has become this year anyway. But we do have the Germany tape also. Like, you and I love to watch our European basketball. Franz been really good in European ball as well. So I do think he's very good. Let's see. Butler I had in there. Anthony Davis is my version of your De'Aaron Fox answer. Not going to matter. I did have in my top 15 Pascal Siakam. I thought he was really good and really important for Indiana. And I actually have on this list, not the other one, I have James Harden in my top 15 as an improved player, in part, again, because he really ramps up the defense in the playoffs. And actually, he retains his value pretty strongly, and you're going to get a lot of him. So that rounded out my top 15. Other names, Jonathan Isaac, just because we hopefully get more of his incredible defense. Brook Lopez, I'm not sure if it's still there, but the way that he can just occasionally be like, oh, you want me to score 25 in the post tonight? Like, there's certain matchups that he can just turn into what he used to be versus a completely different player he is now. Evan Mobley and Jaren Jackson are projection answers here, but I mentioned Grizzlies. Those seem like the dudes I want in a playoff run. Like, that's why I was so high on both of them in the NBA draft when we got here. And so I think that we're going to see, I need to see if the offense can translate. Can you do stuff offensively and not just be play finishers? I'm not convinced yet, but defensively, that's dudes that I want on my team. So both of those two. And then, surprisingly, I have Tobias Harris on this list. Tobias has been pretty good in the playoffs, man. Like, his numbers are pretty strong year after year. Austin Reeves showed up on this list for me. Brandon Clark has been really good. Another Laker, Dorian Finney-Smith. I think just as a player type, he's repping Nicola Batum. He's repping Torrey Craig. You want the wing type. You want the guy that can be big and stay on the court. Like, DFS is playing like 38 minutes a game in playoffs in his career. Maybe that's just you don't have options, but that's the point. You don't have a lot of these dudes. So I thought that was interesting. For your sake, I'm going to mention three names here at the very bottom, because two of them will just get you a little wink here. Paolo Banchero made it onto my positive list. We'll see. We'll see. And then my only two Thunder names here in the whole exercise positive, Aaron Wiggins, kind of a dude, kind of in that wing group that he's going to be on the court. And begrudgingly, my final honorable mention, positive Delta, Lou Dort, the torture chamber. What can I say? I think the defense is overrated, but in the postseason, especially against that Luka Harden, maybe Shea type, I don't know, that is just more valuable. And frankly, he doesn't do as much offensively anymore, which is why I can kind of like him, because he's not as damaging on that end. And, you know, he does improve BPM from minus 1.6 to minus 0.5. That's a positive delta, even if it's still not my favorite. So, Lou Dort, any comments? 30 seconds before we wrap this thing up and get out of here.
No, let's end on Lou Dort as a beautiful ending to a very fun episode.
All right, so that is our positive Delta players in the postseason. Thanks to Jim Turvey. Don't forget to download and check out everything in the Action Network app. In the Action Network Discord, you get a link to that in the description. Follow us on Bucket. Subscribe here for daily best bets, Future Jays, Futures Fridays. We'll be back next week with the negative version of this podcast. You know we love the negative versions. Let's get buckets.